Welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening seminar series put on by University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus in Nome and also University of Alaska Fairbanks Alaska Sea Grant. And you're in the home office tonight, which is a good thing because the weather's kind of bad and everybody, I'm hoping, is camping in front of their screens watching tonight. So Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant, we are public servants for the Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Central Yupik peoples. And tonight, being a little bit under the gray skies and windiness of Nome, we have two really good speakers tonight calling in. We've got Jessica Crance and Kim Shelden. Jessica Crance will lead off. She will give her presentation, and then Kim Shelden will give her presentation, and they've asked for questions to be at the very end. So write your question down if you've got something early on. Jessica Crance and Kim Shelden are research biologists with the Cetacean Assessment and Ecology program. They are with NOAA, which is in charge of all for management and research for all the whales, seals, and sea lions in our neck of the woods. And they are calling tonight in and taking the time to present to us. They work at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Seattle. So they're on extra late duty, and we really appreciate that with the time difference. That is very kind for us. So tonight we're going to hear about two research efforts that are headed our way 2024 this summer, and they both have to do with whales. And we'll just, I think, let our speakers speak for themselves. So we're going to learn more about each of these research efforts by air and by sea. So take it away, Jessica. We are so glad you're here.
Great. Thank you so much. It's always a great pleasure to be here and talking to you guys. So our talk tonight, Kim and I are both going to present, as Gay mentioned, on some field surveys that will be happening in the Bering Sea. So we wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you guys about the work that's going to be done in your neighborhood, so you know what to expect, some of the results that you might come to find, how you can contact us with questions, just so you have kind of a better understanding of what we're going to be doing this summer. So I'm going to start things off. I'm going to be talking about the International Whaling Commission's Power Survey that's happening this summer. So first, a little bit of background. The Power Survey, POWER is just an acronym. It stands for the Pacific Ocean Whale and Ecosystem Research Survey. A little bit of a mouthful, but these surveys began in 2010, and this is the International Whaling Commission's survey program that is designed to kind of do cruises in areas that are either very remote or poorly studied or that don't have a lot of data. And in order to understand the abundance, density, stock structure of cetaceans with a focus on stock structure of all cetaceans with a focus on large whales. For this survey, the ship time and the crew is provided by the government of Japan. And so these surveys are primarily what we call a visual line transect survey. So we follow predetermined track lines and we identify and we count every marine mammal that we see with a focus on large cetaceans, so those large baleen whales. If it is a higher priority species, we will also break from track line to collect photo ID data. So photo ID photographs. We will also collect biopsy samples. And biopsy sample, that's that photo in the middle. It's a small piece of skin and blubber that we collect from the whale that we can then use to get a lot of information about that animal. We can get sex, reproductive status, we can get diet information, we can get a lot of really great data from that small piece of skin and blubber. And so these two plots show the areas that the power surveys have studied since their inception in 2010. So you can see we've really covered a pretty substantial area of the North Pacific. And the great thing about these is they have really helped to increase our knowledge of large whales in these remote areas. We've been able to get abundance estimates for key species. And most importantly, they have really allowed for surveys in understudied or logistically difficult to get to areas. And then in 2017, you'll notice that they began surveying in the Eastern Bering Sea. And because they were going to be surveying in North Pacific right whale habitat, we convinced them to include passive acoustics as a component to those surveys to help us locate North Pacific right whales. And so this is where I'm going to detour a little bit to talk about one of my favorite whale species that if you aren't familiar with, I hope you'll know by the end of this talk. North Pacific right whales. They were once widely distributed throughout the entire North Pacific and Bering Sea before they became the target of commercial whaling. And it's estimated that somewhere between 26 and 37,000 animals were taken, with the majority of that occurring within just a couple of decades. And so this brought the population down to, we think, maybe the high hundreds. And then the Soviets began hunting illegally in the early 1960s. And it's estimated that they took an additional over 700 animals and just decimated what was left of the eastern population. So to get an abundance estimate, NOAA began conducting surveys in the Bering Sea. And from those data, they found that the population size was only about 30 animals. Of that, only 8 are females, with a 3-to-1 male bias sex ratio, which unfortunately is the opposite ratio you want when you're trying to rebuild a population. And so while these results are specific to the Bering Sea, the infrequent sightings outside of that area suggest that the overall population size is fewer than 50 animals. And so this population is very much facing extinction. So because of that, NOAA designated 2 areas in Alaska as critical habitat. There's a larger area in the southeastern Bering Sea, delineated by that red hashed polygon, and then a smaller one in the Gulf of Alaska. And so we know that these animals can be found in these areas every year. They're their main feeding grounds. But what we don't know is where these animals go when, or even if they leave these feeding grounds. Their migration routes and calving grounds are all still unknowns. There are these basic life history questions about an entire population of whales that we just don't understand. We also haven't seen any calves since about 2004. And even if you go back into those old whaling logbooks, even those books say that there's no evidence that they located calving grounds in the North Pacific. And so there's this big question mark about North Pacific right whales, where they go, where the cow-calf pairs are. And so now I'm going to kind of jump back to the power surveys, right? So again, in 2017, you can see our track lines for that year are shown there in that kind of maroon purple color. They were going right through that right whale critical habitat. And so we added passive acoustics to try and help us locate right whales. So right whales make primarily 3 different call types that you kind of see here. These are visual representations of their sounds. And so if we hear any one of these specific call types, then odds are good that we have a right whale in the area. So when I'm out at sea, I use an instrument called a sonobuoy. I deploy over the side of the vessel, and it will transmit in real time any sounds that are occurring back to the vessel using VHF radio waves. So if a right whale starts calling, I can hear it essentially as it happens. And the other good thing is that these buoys have directional capabilities. And so if I do start hearing a right whale, I can deploy multiple sonobuoys at once, as you see here in the screen. And all of these blue lines are directional bearings to a calling animal. And so wherever those lines cross is where we had a right whale. And so by adding passive acoustics and these instruments to our surveys, we have been able to cite at least 18 confirmed unique right whales since the Power Survey inceptions. We've cited even more that we just weren't able to photograph. We've been able to get 6 different biopsy samples. So this has really been a phenomenal opportunity for us to increase our knowledge about this critically endangered population. But as I mentioned, these power surveys are not just right whale surveys, they are large whale and cetacean surveys. So these plots here are just a few examples of some of the results we can get from these surveys. These show all of the sighting locations for the different species from 2010 through 2020. So not only can you kind of get this really large scale look at distribution of these different species, but you can see how that distribution really varies from species to species. And I do want to mention, for those who may be interested, you can get all of these sightings data from the International Whaling Commission's website, and I've got that listed here. You can get all the sightings data. You can even apply to get, some of the biopsy data. So it's really been a really wonderful collaborative survey that I think is a really great example of international collaborations and the types of data that you can get from these large scale surveys. So now I want to talk about this summer, what we're going to be doing. So for this year and next year, we will be surveying a small portion of the southern Chukchi and then the Bering Sea. We'll be doing the eastern Bering in this year, this summer, and then the central Bering Sea next year. So this year's survey, I want to talk a little bit about some of the specifics. As I mentioned, we'll be surveying from the southern Chukchi Sea from about 69 degrees north down to the Aleutian Islands chain. So the survey will begin and end in Dutch Harbor, which is in that yellow star there. We'll be departing Dutch Harbor on the 13th of August and heading due north. We should be hitting that northernmost track line around the 16th of August, and then we'll start working our way south from there. By the 24th of September, so it's roughly a month and a half, almost a 2-month survey. By the 24th of September, we will be finishing that southwesternmost transect line. I'm not sure if you can actually see my mouse or not, but we'll be finishing down in this far southwest corner by the 24th.
We can see your mouse. It's good. Keep using
Perfect.
it. Good.
Fantastic. So we'll be finishing down in this corner around the 24th of September and then returning to Dutch Harbor by the 26th. A little bit more info about the specific objectives and our target species. So the overall objectives, as I mentioned earlier, is to get kind of abundance and density information, stock structure information for all large whales. Some of our higher priority species up in the southern Chukchi, we'll be looking primarily for gray whales to help us better understand stock structure. In the southern Bering Sea, we're hoping to find humpback whales again to try and better understand the different stocks that are meeting in those areas. And then, of course, North Pacific right whales are always the highest priority species. And I left it very broad to just say population information, anything we can get about this population in particular, photo ID, photographs, biopsy samples, anything along those lines. So these are our 3 main survey areas and our track lines there, delineated by those black lines. And as you can see, we're going again right through that right whale critical habitat, but in a slightly different direction. So our track lines this year will be kind of complementary to those from 2017. So a little more specifics about the methods. Again, it's a visual line transect. Although the large whales are our priority, We will be documenting all marine mammals, and that does include pinnipeds. So we will have species and group size and behavioral information for any marine mammal that we encounter. We will be getting, for high priority species, we'll be collecting photo ID photographs, as well as biopsy samples. And again, that passive acoustic monitoring via sonobuoys, and you can see deploying one off the back of the ship there. And so I want to end with our communication plan. So I will be on board for this survey as the NOAA representative. And I will be sending out daily emails to all the villages when we're in the area. And I'll be including information such as position, course and speed, weather conditions, our planned activities for the day, any species seen, or anything else that might be of interest or of note. If there is a need to get in touch with the vessel, you are able to hail the vessel over VHF systems. You can contact the Ocean Maroon number 2. Their AIS will be turned on for the entirety of the survey. And if hailing the vessel, you can ask for NOAA, you can ask for Crance, which is my last name. And I mentioned that because it is a Japanese crew, and not all of the crew have the best English. And so typically whenever someone hails the vessel, they automatically come and bring me to the bridge. But specifically, if you ask for NOAA or Crance, that ensures that you will talk to me directly. And then I'm happy to communicate with you about the vessel's activities and what we're doing. And I do want to reiterate that it is a Japanese vessel and crew, but the survey is an International Whaling Commission survey. So all of the data, the track lines, everything has been kind of determined by the IWC. And again, those data are available on their website. And so I just want to finish here by saying that this talk here was just to tell you about what we're going to be doing this summer. I'll be giving a talk later in the year where I present some of the results from this survey. And we waited to kind of give a results talk until I had kind of a comparison of the 2 years, because they're going to be very different. And so stay tuned several months from now, later in this year, and I'll be giving a talk about comparing the Power Cruise results this year, hopefully with some of the ones from previous years. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Kim Shelden and have her continue on with an update on her survey this summer.
All right.
Yeah,
and thank you so much for that. And Kim, I muted you. I just wanted to let you know, because we were picking up some noise from your mic. So no worries there. Just looks like you're unmuted.
Yeah.
Take it away. And I've got questions. It'll be great. Go for it.
Right,
Take it away,
let's see
Kim.
if I can get
Beluga
this.
whales by air.
Gonna.
It's the green.
Yes.
Go down to the bottom on your toolbar. There's a green button. You got, yes.
Let's see if I can get it to
Presentation mode.
start. Is that
You're
working?
on. Perfect. Looks terrific. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for having us here to talk about our field work that's coming up this summer. And for my portion of it, it's a much smaller area. We're going to be doing some work on belugas of the Eastern Bering Sea. And so if folks happen to have tuned in 2022 for Megan Ferguson's Strait Science Talk, she described the long-term beluga research program led by the Alaska Beluga Whale Committee. And an important part of this program is to provide information necessary for beluga hunters to manage their harvest and make sure it's sustainable in the Norton Sound and the Yukon area. And this work is conducted in participation with NOAA Fisheries. And there have been 2 recent aerial surveys, and we're planning a 3rd one for this June. So today, what I'll be doing is I'd like to give a little recap of some of the background information Megan presented about why these aerial surveys are important, and to give an update on the results from the surveys that took place in 2017 and in 2022, and our plans for this June. And hopefully my slides are advancing okay. So to start off, so why are,
Your slides look great. They're doing
thank you,
fine.
Kay.
Yep.
So why are belugas important? Um, Belugas are an important subsistence food for many villages in Norton Sound and the Yukon and have been for millennia. And not only is it necessary that belugas be healthy and abundant for many generations, but that they're also a part of a healthy ocean. And they are an important part of the ecosystem because as both predators and as prey, they are one of the only whales present in really large numbers in the Norton Sound and Yukon area during the ice-free months. And the more we understand about these belugas, the better we understand the ecosystems where they live and how these ecosystems are changing. So, as I mentioned, these photos show how important belugas are to the Alaska Native subsistence communities, from hunting and harvesting belugas to preparing the meat and muktuk to sharing a meal. These activities provide opportunities for families and friends to be together and fostering community and strengthening relationships. And belugas are a healthy traditional source of food. So this map kind of provides a very simple representation of where belugas have often been found in Norton Sound and the Yukon. And to conserve and manage belugas requires knowledge about the past, the present, and the future. And this means trying to find answers to a number of questions. So we need to know things like how abundant the population is. And so using methods like our aerial surveys to count them in order to answer the how many question. What habitats are important to them? So we look at their distribution using aerial surveys and satellite tags to help answer the where are they question. So are they all part of the same population, which sometimes is referred to as a stock, and how related are they? And using genetics from skin samples provided by hunters, we try to answer the who are they question. What behaviors do we observe when they're in different habitats? Are they feeding, mating, raising their young? The what are they doing question. How do changes in prey like salmon, sea ice, presence of predators like killer whales, or effects of human activities like noise from shipping and construction affect them? The what causes them to stay and go question. And last but not least is how contaminants, disease, and climate change may be affecting them, just to try to answer the how healthy are these whales. So to help us answer these questions, we consider all sources of information, indigenous knowledge and local knowledge, and also Western science. And a huge part of this is achieved through co-management. And I'm putting a definition up here of co-management that was derived by a number of Alaska Native organization members and federal agency resource managers that was published by the Marine Mammal Commission. And what it's really based on is this partnership of trust and respect that we try to, attempt to establish between an Alaska Native organization as defined under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and either the National Marine Fisheries Service, which is the same as NOAA Fisheries, which I work for, or Fish and Wildlife Service, with that shared responsibility for conservation of marine mammals and their sustainable subsistence use by Alaska Natives. So the ABWC is a co-management group that was established in 1988, and members of the ABWC include beluga hunters, as well as scientists and natural resource managers that include local, state, federal, and tribal governments. The ABWC has a number of goals, which primarily include maintaining healthy populations of belugas and to provide for adequate harvest and protecting hunting privileges. So for more background, ABWC and NOAA are partners, and we work together to manage 4 stocks, which I mentioned are also known as populations of belugas. And these populations are shown here in the area where they spend their summer months. So the Eastern Bering Sea stock, which is found in Norton Sound and the Yukon area, is shown here in orange. The Eastern Chukchi Sea stock and the Beaufort Sea stock, whose summer ranges overlap in the Arctic. And the southernmost Bristol Bay stock. The Cook Inlet stock is not managed by the ABWC. This population is listed as endangered, and hunting has not been allowed since 2005. And currently, the belugas found in Kotzebue Sound are being evaluated based on a recommendation from the ABWC. So in 1999, NOAA Fisheries and ABWC began co-managing belugas. Work conducted by NOAA is regulated under laws such as the Marine Mammal Protection Act and Endangered Species Act. And NOAA provides support through collaboration and funding. So without an abundance estimate, it's very difficult to know whether the beluga harvest is sustainable. So scientists take into account how many belugas there are, how often they reproduce, how old they are when they have their first calves. And we use a lot of this information to determine how many belugas can be harvested and have the population stay healthy and not decline. And as I mentioned, beluga abundance is also an indicator of ecosystem health. So how do we go about counting them? The standard method that the ABWC and NOAA have used to estimate abundance for eastern Bering Sea belugas and other beluga populations is aerial surveys. And these photos show the aircraft used during the survey in 2022, the pilots and the observers. We have two pilots that fly the plane. One observer looks out the left window and one looks out the right window. And that's me looking out the right window. These windows allow observers to look beneath, outward, and forward of the airplane. One scientist records data into a computer. And for our 2024 survey this year, we will also have a camera that we're going to mount in the belly of the plane to help with detecting whales that may surface directly under the plane, and to document presence of calves, juveniles, and adults based on body color. So in our line transect survey, the airplane flies along an imaginary line called a transect, and observers scan for belugas. And for our surveys, we fly at an altitude of just over 1,000 feet and at a speed of about 115 knots. And at this altitude, sounds from the plane rarely disturb the whales. So some belugas are detected by the observers, but some belugas are not detected. And for us to estimate population abundance, we need to estimate what part of the population was not detected. So this unknown quantity is called the detection probability, with which we apply statistics to get at some of these numbers. And this is where were there whales at the surface that were not seen, and were whales beneath the surface, so not available to be seen. And these are some of the corrections we want to apply to our counts to get at an abundance estimate. So Megan Ferguson provided details of past surveys during her Straight Science talk in 2022. And these surveys began back in 1992 and were repeated each year until 1995, then conducted in 1999 and 2000. And the one panel here shows all the track lines and locations of sightings. And this other panel shows the satellite image of the water with the group sizes. And so you can see in both of these maps, some of the largest groups and most whales were found along the Yukon River Delta and coastline. And more information on these surveys are provided in a paper by Lloyd Lowry and on the North Slope Burrows website, which also includes links to satellite tag whales and a whole lot of other information about all the studies that have been conducted in the Norton Sound and Yukon area. But for this talk, I'm going to focus on the results from the most recent surveys conducted in 2017 and 2022, and as well as showing you where we plan to fly this year in 2024. So similar to the previous slide, these two panels show the planned track lines, and these thicker track lines are those we were actually able to survey, and the group sizes seen in 2017 and in 2022. So in 2017, the aerial survey team had amazing weather. They surveyed almost 5,400 miles of track line. Many of the track lines they were able to survey more than once, and they saw almost 1,900 belugas. In 2022, unfortunately, weather did not cooperate, as many of you know from the Norton Sound area. We just had some really terrible weather. And we also had to start later in June than past surveys due to COVID restrictions. The team surveyed a little over 2,200 miles of track line with some big gaps in effort due to bad weather. We also added some lines farther south to Hooper Bay based on a recommendation from the ABWC, and we saw 821 belugas. But we also had much larger group sizes than seen in 2017. And recall, these are the uncorrected counts from these two surveys. So next thing we do is to apply models to estimate the abundance. And in this case, two types of models were applied to the data. And these models correct for things like I mentioned, counts by considering the amount of area surveyed, how often it was surveyed, and the area not surveyed due to bad weather, poor sighting conditions, how many belugas that may have been missed on the track line so they were not detected, and belugas that were below the surface so they were not available to be counted. Models also take into consideration the size of the groups. And so results for the design-based model, which is based only on a conventional line transect estimates for the survey, the estimate came to 12,269 belugas in 2017 and a little over 20,000 belugas in 2022. So this was compared to 4 different spatial models that were combined into one overall model. And the reason this was done was to look at the distribution of belugas relative to where we see them because of the patchiness of their distribution. So the study area was actually divided into these tiny small units that look like a honeycomb. And the model assumes that beluga density is constant within a single honeycomb cell. And so then this matches, like I mentioned, the patchiness of where belugas occur better than using just the line transect method that was shown on the previous slide. So the brighter the color, the greater number of belugas. And you can kind of see, hopefully, that the number is not the same for 2017 and 2022 for the number of animals in each of these cells. So for example, in the yellow cells, in 2017, this was about 200 to 250 belugas within one of those little honeycomb cells. But in 2022, this was about 900 to over 1,000 belugas in one of those little cells. So results from these models were similar to the other model. I gave an abundance in 2017 of 11,597, belugas, and 17,197 belugas in 2022. Megan is the lead author on the paper describing these methods, which will be submitted to a scientific journal this summer. So these numbers are not yet final numbers. And if you do have specific questions about these particular models, I will have to reach out to her for the answers because I am not a quantitative person. I just fly the surveys, collect the data. So, and these, what we do with some of these most recent estimates then is when we do the stock assessment report for the Eastern Bering Sea stock, we'll calculate things like the potential biological removal level. And this is the number that was developed to manage commercial fisheries, not subsistence harvest, but this is the maximum number of animals that, not including natural mortalities, that may be removed from a marine mammal stock while allowing that stock to continue to thrive. So for right now, we won't be calculating this number until after the paper is published and a final estimate is published. But currently, if you did go to our current recent stock assessment report, it is the PBR, as it's called, is 267 belugas, which is based on the design-based model estimate from 2017. So moving on to our plans for this June. The team will arrive in Nome on June 17th, similar to the 2017 survey. So we'll be getting there about the same time and not late like we did in 2022. We'll extended the survey a little bit farther into July just to account for if we have as many poor weather days as we had in 2022. Based on the recommendations from the ABWC, we've added even more lines south to Hooper Bay since we were encountering whales south of the 2017 study area during our 2022 surveys. We added this high density area that we hope to sample multiple times. As you saw from the previous figures, this is where we tend to find the bigger groups and the bulk of the beluga population. As I mentioned before, we'll be testing a camera mounted in the belly of the plane to see how many whales may be surfacing beneath the aircraft. And those images will also be high enough resolution so that we may be able to tell juveniles, adults, or calves are present. We will have a field report documenting the distribution of whales and our survey effort, probably by this fall. And we're currently planning to have an abundance estimate, hopefully by fall of 2025. And while we are in Nome and flying, we're hoping to get out daily reports of where we're flying and what we're seeing. So I'd just like to acknowledge the ABWC and its executive committee, without which this work could not be accomplished. Our leadership at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center and the Alaska Regional Office, Megan Ferguson for her work on this project, and the pioneering efforts of Lloyd Lowry and Doug Master. Our survey team for 2024 includes myself and Amelia and Cynthia. And we would like to thank the ABWC for contracting Clearwater Air. These aircraft are specially designed for these types of surveys and have worked with us on numerous projects throughout Alaska. Thank you so much for listening. And I guess Jess and I are happy to answer any questions folks have.
All right. Well, thank you both so very much for taking the time to give us a overview of what's headed our way, both in the Strait and Eastern Bering, as well as Norton Sound. So thank you both for that. And this is the time for the Strait Science audience to give a little love in the chat box to Kim and Jessica, because it's never easy to be a public speaker, and they did a great job. And show that love. I can see your first question, Doug, but on Strait Science, callers have priority. So we stand down if a caller has a question, and we have 2 callers that have called in. I don't know if you have questions. It's darn hard to be a caller on a Zoom call because you can't undo yourself or jump up and down or raise your hand. So if you're a caller, you can just either unmute yourself, which I think is *6, or sometimes, and we've been having some techno problems, at least here at this end of things, with that solar, whatever, the sunspot thing that just happened with the beautiful aurora in the dark of the south. And my number is 907-434-1149. If you can't get through, you can text me, and I will read out the question and we can get an answer that way. So give the callers a second if they want to unmute. And if not, that's fine. And know that you can jump in. Don't be shy to do that. So first off the bat, I see Doug Molyneux. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, great talk there. Thanks. And I guess a question first for Jessica. You know, she mentioned killer whales as being one of the target species that she's looking for. And can she give a little more background about those killer whales? Are they more the resident or transient fish eaters versus marine mammal eaters?
Yeah. Thanks for your question. Killer whales are slightly lower priority than the large baleen whales, but we will count and identify them. Depending on how close they are to the track line, we will break and we'll go and collect photographs and then attempt to identify them to ecotypes. So we'll be able to know, hopefully, whether they are residents or transients. So with regards to specific results that you saw about killer whales, you'll have to stay tuned for the fall talk when I give another Strait Science talk and present the results. But yes, if we will collect information on killer whales and hopefully try to identify them to ecotype.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right. And one of the callers is unmuted. So if you have a question, go for it.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me this is for Jessica. My name is Morris. By the way, I'm from the village of Stebbins in the Northern Sound area. Born and raised in Stebbins. I spent most of my life, subsistence, hunting, and one of the primary animals that we wait for and hunt is the beluga. And rather recently, and sometime later, there was a report of the salmon declining, and I was wondering if the belugas eat salmon as reported by many agencies, or a decline of that might be related to that. But I know that global warming, the water is getting warm in most of the coastal areas, even the Yukon, are limited to salmon fishing. I was just wondering if that in the measure would, affect the belugas, the salmon being part of their food chain, and it would be devastating for communities that totally rely on the mammal. And we hate to see, not hunt belugas when time is right for us. But the reports, are sort of conflicting in a way, because we see belugas when the herrings are running as well as the salmon. So my concern is that, and I guess for the majority of communities in the Northern Sound as well as the Yukon, that the salmon is not as abundant as it used to be. So how would that affect the beluga population by any chance?
All right, good question, Morris. Is the salmon decline, which we really see here, having an effect on the numbers or on the beluga?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. With our track lines and where they are, we may not be best suited to help answer that this year. But hopefully that's something that maybe Kim and their survey may be able to help answer with some of the numbers that they're seeing this year. But yeah, it's certainly a very tricky question, and one that we hope we can eventually get an answer for you.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you. And Kim, if you can stop share, that way we could see Jessica big, or whoever's the speaker. I think there we go. Does that help? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Doug. I know that wasn't quite the answer you were hoping for. Unfortunately, with our track lines the way they are, we probably won't run into too many belugas. So our results from this survey this year may not be able to help answer that, but that's something that we certainly hope we'll be able to answer in the future.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Morris. Any other questions? Because I've got one. I've got a couple. And that is, they have, I hope that you guys, I don't know how much the federal government, because you guys are NOAA, and this is for the power cruise, the International Whaling Commission Japanese ship. So for that one, we've been told there's going to be, the military are here more, training and things like that on a more regular basis. And I believe that we're going to have some exercise in the strait that may be going on during the time that you will be passing through. I don't know how much you're coordinating that, but you might want to double check. Are you guys simpatico with the?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I hadn't heard about that, but I get in communications with the Coast Guard, the Navy. Obviously, they know about the survey that we're doing because they approved the use of sonobuoys. And so if there were any potential conflicts or overlap in areas or timing, I would imagine I would hear about that just because we are doing passive acoustic monitoring. So they are aware of our location, our planned track lines, and our dates. Yeah.
Then the other one, of course, you might want to ask it, because we won't, I don't know. I'm not that high on the food chain, but the Russians have been conducting annual drills typically in the fall now. And I don't know if you might want to double check on that, because you're going to be, I notice you're not coming up the west side. You're not going to be on the west side of St. Lawrence Island at all. You're going to be on the east side.
Yeah.
Going that
Yeah.
way. Okay.
Yeah,
And
this year we'll be well away from the border. And historically in previous surveys, whenever we do get anywhere near that border, I have a strict minimum 5 mile rule for for sonobuoy deployments, just to make sure that there's no chance of buoys kind of drifting over into Russian waters. Yeah,
oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah, they probably
yeah.
wouldn't like that. And for like last year, we had a US Canadian drill south of St. Lawrence to Adak, and then literally with I think a 4-day break in between. That was a 2-week exercise. And then we rolled right into the Russians kind of countered that with a drill that went within 16 miles of Gamble, I believe. And at that time, people were complaining that they couldn't see the seals, where are the whales? And so I just didn't want you guys to at least be aware, if you come on up, double check, see if there's a reason why you're not seeing what you're looking for. Hopefully that won't be the case, but we are seeing some odd things nowadays.
Yeah,
So
good call. We'll definitely be on the
coordinate
lookout for
with
that.
the Coast Guard should be able to help you.
Yeah, and I communicate with the Coast Guard regularly as well. From day one of the survey up until the end, I have regular communications with Coast Guard as well. Yeah.
Oh, and I was just going to make a comment, Doug. I was just going to make a comment when when Jessica was saying about hailing the vessel, their vessel, what's the name of the vessel?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the Yushin Maru #2.
Yushin
I'll-
Maru #2.
Yeah,
So
I'll put that in the chat for everyone.
okay, that's awesome. Thank you. And all these vessels are going to have VHF radio, and all vessels, traveling through the area, through the Bering Strait region, you can call them on channel 16. So if you say that boat's name and you get the fellow that answers the radio should know limited English, even if he's a Japanese speaker, because he has to be able to talk to the Coast Guard. But you can ask for a researcher or whatever if you get a hold of that vessel, and the radio, they'll tell you to turn to a different channel that is more friendly to talk on, since 16 is where everyone's trying to find each other and make connections. You don't have a long conversation on that
Absolutely.
channel.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's how
Thanks for mentioning that, Gay.
that's how you get a hold of the ship.
Absolutely. The officers that are on duty, they do have limited English, enough to be able to communicate. But when you start to have these longer dialogues and conversations, that's when they tend to get a little overwhelmed. And so they generally do bring me up into the bridge to act as liaison.
Yeah.
But feel free to ask for NOAA. That's easy to remember. If you ask for NOAA, they'll come and get me. You can ask for Crance, Jessica, researcher. Any of those will work, and they'll go ahead and bring American, anything. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Jessica. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize the questions here, but this is, I guess, more for Kim on those belugas. That one slide, I think it was slide number 8 or 7 that you had there, you showed the distribution of the beluga populations, and they're all very isolated. So is there no gene flow between those populations? And since they're all still beluga whales and they're not evolving in the different species, I kind of wonder what the historical distributions have been like. Any comments on that at all?
That's actually a really good question. That map that I was showing is their summering areas. So in the wintertime, there is quite a bit of overlap where these populations come together in the Bering Sea because the ice tends to push them out of those summering areas. But a lot of it's driven by the mothers bringing their calves back to the same areas each year. And so there's a geneticist that's worked really closely with the hunters and gotten a lot of samples from all these different areas. And what he's found is even though they might overlap in the wintertime, there isn't a lot of interbreeding necessarily at that time either. So these little summering areas do tend to stick to, there's a little bit, there's still a little bit that happens, but for the most part, you can tell these populations apart by their genetics. And a lot of it's driven by these moms bringing their calves back to the same areas each year.
Any information on whether that was the case historically? Going back further in time, is there a way of testing that genetically at all?
I believe there have been a few papers looking even farther back in terms of what, maybe where bottlenecks have occurred during ice ages and things like that, and when populations became separated. But I would have to look those up. But Greg O'Corey Crow is the geneticist who he's published quite a few papers. And if you look up O'Corey Crow, you will find not just on the belugas in Alaska, but he's looked at belugas all over the Northern Hemisphere and those different population structures. And it carries over into Canada, and it carries over into other areas where belugas are found, like off Greenland and Svalbard as well. So there's some really great papers that he's published all about this, and how the populations, the structure of the population tends to go along these mother-child line type of things. So
Thanks very much. Good talk.
sure.
All right. Thanks, Kim. Marty, I see your question, but let's go to Cheryl and I'll circle back. Good evening, Cheryl. Glad you're on.
Thank you. Good evening. The Ocean Maroon #2 sounds familiar. Is it one of the vessels that used to do what you call it, research or something in the Southern Hemisphere?
Yeah, thanks for your question. This vessel has been used for research in the Southern Ocean. Prior to the power surveys, there were the sour surveys, which is the Southern Ocean equivalent. And this is one of the vessels that was used to conduct the surveys in the Southern Ocean as well.
Yeah, they harvested a lot of whales. I believe I remember recalling them taking whales down in the Southern Hemisphere. They're not going to be doing that up here, are they?
No, you are correct. It is a vessel that has been known to harvest whales, but they only do that within their economic zone. There will be no harvesting of any marine mammal species at all. This is strictly just a visual and passive acoustic survey. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was my questions.
Great, thank you.
And I just looked it up on the wiki, and let me drop it in the chat here. It's there. It's got an interesting history, actually, typing it in. And there it is. That's the history of it. That's not the current situation. It sounds like it's going to be on doing research. But if you've got AIS, that's going to be a good one. I'll be looking out for that one. I have AIS at work. And so we'll be keeping a track. And you said, Jessica, you're going to be emailing the tribal offices?
Correct. Yeah, their AIS will be on and active for the entirety of the survey. And yes, I will be emailing all of the communities whenever we are anywhere near the villages with basic information on the ship's location, speed course, planned activities, anything interesting, species seen, anything else that might be of interest to the communities as well. Yeah, absolutely.
And that'll be going daily?
Correct. Yeah.
To the
every morning.
offices, to the tribal offices. Okay, I got it now.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people make lists of just like friends and stuff, but it really should go tribal. That's awesome. You're doing it. That's all right. There is a in the chat box, Marty Reedy, to Gay's point, is there an assumption that the military exercises affects the distribution of marine mammals, or has that been documented? And my current understanding on that, it is not documented. And I say that because we had the people that were traveling well, I won't get into it. Maybe next week, we're going to actually have those people back. So we'll hear what they had to say about some of this. But people were, really saying they're not seeing marine mammals at a time when they should be seeing even like seal. At the time, those exercises involve submarines. We're squished in on the boundary. If no one's at St. Lawrence Island, if you're not familiar with this region, we just plumb run out of water in the Bering Strait. We're surrounded by land. And they were launching rockets, missiles. They're doing ordnance drills. And so to my knowledge, that's not being documented if that's having an effect, nor is industrial ship traffic increase. I just don't know. Is it? Can you guys, that's the question.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of hypotheses as to how military activities do influence behavior, distribution of marine mammals. Um, Certainly, anthropogenic noise has been shown on various occasions to impact vocal behavior, could impact distribution. So the possibility is certainly there. But as far as how well it has been strictly documented and specifically tied back to military activities, there's still a little bit of question there as to the direct impacts to the various species, in particular the ones that we would see up in our area.
So for the drills that are going on, I guess the question would be for the drills that are going on in the tight quarters of the northern Bering Strait region, northern Bering Sea, Bering Strait region, not further south in the big Bering, but up in our little cluster. Those, I know you've got, some people have acoustics down attached to these mooring devices that are chains with a buoy on top, and they're getting, probably the Navy is too, but somebody's picking up all the sounds. Is NOAA got people that are looking at Marty's questions, if that affects the distribution of marine mammals? And you may not know that, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, well, I can speak to our instruments. We do have an array of recorders throughout the Bering Shelf, including up into the Strait region. We have not really gotten a lot of military noise on our buoys, and so we have not been able to document any kind of noticeable impacts to cetacean behavior. So that's not to say it doesn't happen. We haven't seen it with where our recorders are located.
And that's further south, huh? Or are they right near in the strait?
We do have some that are immediately north and south of the strait.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. I do have a question. Let me just double check. I'm not Buttininski on the train of questions. So this one's for Kim. So I heard that in 2017, using either model, the Norton Sound is somewhere at 17 to 20,000 beluga in the summer.
Oh, the ranges that you were talking about with the two different.
Like one method
estimates.
was 17 and the other method was, I hope I wrote it down.
Yeah,
right, 20.
so yeah, depending on the model that's used, right? So for like for the 2022 model, with the line transect type model, which doesn't take into account how animals might be distributed patchily and things like that, it gives about 20,000, right? But it has that estimate has a little bit bigger confidence interval around it, just because we had a lot of bad weather, things like that, right? So there's a little bit of more uncertainty in that estimate. And then the other estimate using the spatial model was above 17,000, so it's within that range. But I didn't also show like the confidence intervals around that. That's just the point estimate within, as you know, when we sometimes show these, we just show the point estimate instead of the whole range of estimates could be within those bounds.
Is the range on that 17 to 20,000 on the low end? Is the range really, is it really uncertain?
That's a really good question. I'd have to go back and look at Megan's paper to see how wide that range actually is. And as I mentioned, these numbers, we're just kind of giving you the ballpark. It's preliminary at this point. She had presented the paper to the International Whaling Commission and got a lot of feedback on it. And so she'll be looking into this a little bit more, tweaking the models some more before it goes to a publication. So until it's peer reviewed and published and out there, none of those estimates are final, but it kind of gives you an idea of how the population in the Norton Sound Yukon Delta area is doing right now. It's up in that, at least it's in the tens of thousands of animals. It's not hundreds like some of our other beluga populations that aren't doing quite as well.
Okay. All right. Just so you keep an eye out, several years ago, I occasionally get calls in Norton Sound of a beluga. It's not a beluga, but it's a beluga size cetacean swimming with beluga that has got no dorsal fin and is polka dotted. blotchy. And I would assume that's a narwhal. We have narwhals recorded down here. And I just wanted to let people know, one, if you see one, I'm sure you'll let us all know while you're.
Absolutely. I'm dying
Yeah.
to see one. It's on
Yeah,
my list.
and number two, I've had to check on because people wanted to harvest, and it is legal under NOAA to harvest a narwhal in our area. And that was through law enforcement. So that, if anyone sees that spotted beluga, like not beluga, it's belugas and narwhals are first cousins, kind of, in our way of thinking out here. They're very closely related, and they probably speak, if not the same language, at least they may not speak the same dialect, but they probably speak the same language, right?
Yeah, we have hybrids showing up in Greenland,
There you go.
narlugas,
Maybe
right?
it's a mixed
Yeah.
narwhal beluga. So anyway, we do occasionally, I get a call on those. And I think John Burns took a nice photograph of an adult big beluga, big narwhal with a tusk southbound while he was doing beluga whale surveys off of Fairway Rock in the 70s. And it was
Yes.
southbound on a
Yep.
glassy, calm day where he was in a Super Cub and can just click a picture like that. So
Yes, we do. And
let
as
us
Robin
know.
Inglis, who is on the line, can attest to, there is a narwhal stock assessment in the Alaska Stock Assessment reports. So
That's correct. And
it
that
was
is why,
recorded.
yeah, talk to me about harvest. And that allows that. So, and they're not listed under ESA, under the Endangered Species Act. So that's good.
No.
Do you see other large whales? You're doing Norton Sound. Jessica's off in like Large Whale Highway. Do you guys see large whales while you're flying around Norton Sound in that map you showed?
No, and that was the thing that was most shocking to me, because the last 2022 is the first time I've done a Norton Sound survey. I've done other surveys like up on the North Slope, Cook Inlet, Bristol Bay, and we do encounter other large whales during those surveys. And there was nary, I mean, it was just like, really, another beluga? Or, maybe a harbor seal here and there, maybe a walrus here and there. But no, it was very interesting to me. I was kind of thinking maybe a gray whale will come in, maybe a humpback would wander in or something. Um, but we also, our farther track lines going farther offshore, out into the deeper waters, we did have a lot of bad weather, right? So we didn't necessarily get that effort where maybe those larger whales would be hanging out more. But we know gray whales come into really shallow areas, so I was kind of hoping.
They'll come around. You just didn't get lucky, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? I see a lot of people from the island are on. Any questions? And our callers are still on. It's always tough to be a caller. I've done that a lot, and you're grateful when someone says, just butt in. So give a shout. Other than that, we'll wait a little bit here. And if no other questions, we'll say thank you so much to Jessica and Kim. And if you guys and I don't know, Robin, if you want to stay on just a little bit after, that would be great. Any other questions? Next week, we're having Straight Science is going to be on the 23rd on next Thursday. And we have very interesting. I kind of mentioned it a little bit before. We had we have Kim Damon Kendall, who is the director in the Washington, D.C. area and headquarters for NOAA's Office of Protected Resources. We're going to have a panel. There's going to be her. There's going to be Anne Marie Ike, who is the lead for protected resources in Alaska. And those two are in charge of the management and research management of all our whales, seals, and sea lions. And then we're also going to be joined by John Bankston, who is the director of the NOAA Marine Mammal Laboratory, actually where Jessica and Kim have their office. So those guys are going to be, they were here last year. They traveled to Anchorage for an Endangered Species Act gathering. And then they split off from the group and they came up to Nome in the summer and we had a meeting in Nome. They went to St. Lawrence Island and met with leadership at St. Lawrence Island and then traveled up to Utqiagvik and met with leadership up there. They are coming back to tell us what lessons they learned, what they heard from regional residents, and how they're planning to address some of the concerns they heard. So that one is going to be a 3 speakers, and we're glad they're coming back. They're doing a great job coming back and telling us what they heard, what they learned, and what they think about that and how they can address that. So don't miss that one. That'll be Thursday, the 23rd. With that, I see no more questions. We'll see you next time, and everybody have a good night. And spring will spring here soon in the Bering Strait region. Hang on, everyone. We're almost done with this storm. Have a good night.